utter brutality of how she was killed was among the worst I've ever seen as a crime reporter.
A brutal killing.
She tried to escape out of her bedroom window.
What happened to her in her house, that shouldn't happen to anybody.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
I think everyone assumed almost from the start that the killer knew the victim somehow.
He kind of had an infatuation with Kim Dorsey.
Based on all this information, his story's coming apart.
The truth will be revealed.
I just couldn't imagine the terror that she was experiencing. Her last words were, "Stop, you're killing me."
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. The gated communities of Jacksonville, Florida, are a haven of tranquility and affluence.
The area is absolutely gorgeous. You have, $500,000 homes. It has a small town feel. A lot of people know one another.
It's a very nice neighborhood, viewed as very safe. There's not a lot of crime there.
But on a quiet Sunday morning, all that is shattered.
Kim. Oh, you got him now.
Jacksonville, what's going?
Please send ambulance back.
Firefighter Derek Dorsey has just returned home from work to discover his wife Kim's motionless body.
Are you with her right now?
Yes, I am. Send rescue.
We are sending rescue. Is she awake?
No, she's not. I think she's dead.
He performed CPR on her. He's been working with the fire department for almost 20 years at this point, so he's seen a lot of things. He knows what to do, in an emergency. However, now the emergency is right in his bedroom.
You can actually hear kind of the waves of emotion. It was obvious to me that all that training and experience just kind of went out the door.
Okay, sir, tell me exactly what happened.
I don't know. She tried to commit suicide. Send rescue.
We are sending rescue. You have to tell me exactly what she did. What happened?
I don't know. She either cut herself or something. I can't see. I'm trying to figure the out.
After performing CPR for several minutes, Derek realizes it's too late.
It's a 607. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Lead investigator Larry Kuskowski and his team, along with Assistant State's Attorney London Kite, arrive at the scene.
The call itself was called in as a possible suicide. But the violence that was evident in the room, one person couldn't do this to themselves. There's a large amount of blood on the floor, on the walls. There's blood on the ceiling. You just knew whatever happened here was very, very violent.
The scene just in and of itself was like, absolutely not, this is not a suicide. When the husband found his wife, he put the comforter over her body. So all I could see really was her foot and her arm. And then when the medical examiner got there, that's when they removed the comforter and exposed the brutality of what happened to her.
It's a tragic end to 38-year-old Kim Dorsey's life.
Kim Dorsey owned a business in the area, very well respected. She seemed like a wonderful person, and it seemed like she had an ideal marriage. people seem to have nothing but good things to say about her.
Well, why would anybody ever do something like this?
Investigators turned to her husband, Derek, to reconstruct the last 24 hours of Kim's life.
Derek told us he had gone to work the previous morning. The fire department works 24-hour shifts. When he comes home Sunday morning, shortly after 8 o'clock, he walks in the bedroom expecting to find his wife, in bed.
They had blackout curtains, so it was very dark in there.
He finds her on the floor at the foot of the bed. He goes, calls 911.
But by that point, Kim is already dead. And the team believes she had been for nearly 24 hours. Not far from Kim's body are the first clues to what happened.
There were plastic wire ties around Kim's ankles and in her wrists. Somebody tried to bind her up. I just figured there's probably a sexual assault here, based on what I saw. There was a broken pool cue on the floor. A gun was on the floor. There was a knife on the floor, all in the vicinity of her body. And there's bullet strikes in the wall and in the door frame in the bedroom. So if somebody was in the bedroom shooting out, did we know who shot? No, not yet. So there are a lot of things that needed to be explained.
Investigators fan out to examine the rest of the Dorsey's home.
Someone had gone through ransacking the kitchen, opened drawers, throwing stuff out of the drawers. Definitely someone looking for something. In the kitchen sink, there's 3 or 4 remotes in there and a keyboard that's part of this surround sound system, which was very odd. There was no damage to the front door that indicated that the door was forced open in any way. But I did notice something that was out of place. There was a ceramic dog statue by the front door, and it was tipped over. You have to take notice of things. During the course of the investigation, you are going over, inch by inch and foot by foot, just to make sure that you're covering everything.
They quickly come to their first conclusion.
The idea that some stranger would break into the house, tie someone up with zip ties, stab them, and beat them with a pool cue, that's just not the way it goes.
Kim Dorsey probably knew her attacker, or the attacker knew how to get into the home.
The simple fact is that you're much more likely to be killed by someone you know than by a stranger. And I think police understand that.
They need to drill down into Derek Dorsey's story.
Anytime a wife is murdered, the husband is a suspect. That's just a fact.
Derek, at this point, had been taken from the scene down to the detective division in downtown Jacksonville. After I walked the scene, I went downtown then to interview Derek.
Derek, I'm Larry Koskowski. It's difficult right now, a lot going on, but I need to talk to you, okay? I gotta get some information from you, okay?
I had him take me through the weekend. He told me on Friday night, Kim had left the house that evening for a couple hours to go do some shopping. They had stayed home Friday night, watched a movie. Derek was up early Saturday morning, and he left for work at about his usual time, right around 7, a little after 7 o'clock Saturday morning. Derek finished his shift on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock. So when he's gone for that 24-hour period, his wife was home by herself. He had tried to call her on Saturday several times via cell phone. Derek worked at a fire station that was about as far north as you could go in the county. Cell phone coverage out there wasn't always the greatest, and the call wouldn't go through. He said that it was not unusual for him not to have those calls answered.
So far, Everything Derek is telling them adds up, with one exception.
Here's a guy that's, trained professional, and we walk in and recognize the scene. This is no suicide. How did he not see that? Is Derek involved?
The one thing that I remember about Derek Dorsey is that he was so transparent. I've never seen someone as transparent as him.
He opened up to me. He took a deep breath and sighed, and he said, well, there's a lot, going on with both of us. He told me that him and Kim basically had just a different kind of a relationship. It was somewhat of a swinging lifestyle. So it went from not really knowing to, okay, now we have maybe some other factors going on here. I wasn't expecting that. But Derek then added on at that, he said, that Kim had stopped doing it because her mother had died 3 or 4 years earlier. Part of her way of coping with her mother's death. She sought out professional medical help, and she was on some medication that caused her to put on some weight and, maybe not feel quite as attractive as she maybe had at one time. That was one of the reasons Derek thought that when he first came home, that she had committed suicide.
With Kim having stopped the swinging lifestyle, they need to find out if Derek had too.
He was very subdued. He was very matter of fact. So I finally asked him, I said, well, listen, is there anybody else?
Any issues, where either one of you stepping out, girlfriend on your behalf or boyfriend on hers? Okay, you got a girlfriend? Okay.
When an investigator learns that the partner of the deceased had been cheating on each other in the relationship, that creates a different mindset for the investigator. In domestic-type murders, infidelity is often part of the motive of someone's death.
The admission of infidelity has made Derek Dorsey the first suspect in his wife's murder.
As an investigator, okay, step back, be careful, make sure you're really asking a lot of good questions of Derek, because this might be your one chance to do it, or he's speaking freely. Get as much information as you can to find out what's going on here.
Okay, you got a girlfriend? Okay, and who's that? Well, we're gonna find out.
We have a weird relationship.
Who has you and your wife?
My wife, it's not a don't ask, don't tell thing, but
tell me about it.
She knows who I was when she married me.
Now you've added some more motive, maybe. Maybe he wants out of this marriage.
They seek to determine what he would have gained with Kim gone.
We always look for, is there a financial benefit to this person's death? Larry did ask him about whether he had any kind of insurance policy, and he didn't. It put him in a worse position to have Kim Dorsey die before him, because she was the main breadwinner.
But that doesn't mean Derek wasn't responsible.
We thought about the time frame, like how much time he would have to drive back and forth from the fire station to the house.
The distance between the two locations is 15 miles and would take almost an hour round trip.
The fire station where he worked was small. They pretty much could account for every single minute of his day. All the firefighters were like, look, if he left that place, then we would definitely know. The detectives verified with all the firefighters. They determined that he had like a lock-solid alibi. Even though Derek Dorsey initially was a suspect, we just couldn't find any kind of crack in his account.
Investigators then consider the other angle.
So, you have this girlfriend that he's talked about. Maybe whoever his girlfriend, lover, whatever you want to call that person, wants the current wife out of the picture. Obviously, now we want to talk to her.
In the event that it's a love triangle, that someone may feel, for example, that they've been wronged by somebody, that they were promised something. I'll leave my wife, I'll leave my husband for you. Someone being jilted can be a very strong factor for murder.
We were also looking into the girlfriend to see if she had any additional information that Derek Dorsey didn't tell us, and also to see if he had ever admitted anything to her.
Detective Kuskowski must determine if Derek's girlfriend shows up anywhere in the last 24 hours of the victim's life.
She was very forthcoming. She spilled her guts about the lifestyle, what everybody was into, and all that. I was able to determine that she was west of the city of Jacksonville, where she resides, and I was able to rule her out.
Hoping to uncover clues about Kim's attacker, investigators return to the crime scene.
Specialists such as blood spatter analysts may be called in certain circumstances where it's not obvious to the investigators what has happened and who is involved, and they need more information, more data to help them discern what exactly took place. It's important to try to figure out the puzzle of what was the sequence of events. Where did the struggle initiate and where did it end? Because it tells you the story of what happened. It tells you the timeline of what happened.
Forensic experts established that the first point of attack is next to the nightstand.
We have a lot of blood cast off on that left side of the bed. She was severely injured, and she stayed there for a significant period of time.
But the evidence then suggests Kim comes to and fights back.
She was able to get to where she kept her gun. It was a 5-shot revolver.
They wanted to know whether I thought it would be probative or helpful to have them string it, which means to show the actual bullet trajectory, and I told them absolutely yes. Kim Dorsey had to be down and low near her nightstand. She fired off 5 shots.
Shooting at somebody that maybe is standing in the doorway or coming back to the doorway.
The strings reveal that despite firing all 5 rounds, Kim misses her attacker.
Trying to explain 5 bullet holes, therefore 5 misses, there's a number of reasons. Fear is the #1 problem. People freeze. We don't know how we're going to react in a state of emergency until we're into it. And it's not surprising that your aim is the last thing you're able to control.
And then that's when he goes back into the room to finish her off. He continued to beat her with a pool cue to the point in which it broke. We actually had the pool cue given to an engineer, and it took a tremendous amount of force to break a pool cue like that, and that was broken on Kim's body. To finish things off, he made sure that he stabbed her in the neck.
The detailed analysis provides all new insights into the crime and the potential perpetrator.
The most telling weapon would have been that pool cue, which all of them were kept upstairs, and that's not a natural weapon for someone to say, yeah, I want to go kill this person, so I'm gonna grab a pool cue.
We were able to figure out that the wire ties that were found on Kim's wrist and ankle, it looked like they came from the office upstairs.
And the knife was from a set that were inside the kitchen.
These were all things that suggest that whoever committed this crime was familiar with the house.
A brutal killer who knew Kim well enough to gain entry into her home and where to find weapons. For investigators, it suggests someone close to the family.
Kim's autopsy had already been performed. We knew she had been sexually assaulted.
We had a foreign male DNA profile, so we knew that we were looking for a man.
Based on what Derek Dorsey had said with other people in the house with the swinging lifestyle, who knows who's been here? Is this somebody that had been there before, that came back knowing Derek wasn't home and wanted to maybe see Kim again? Who knows?
We were looking at all those different individuals to make sure that we either rule them in or rule them out.
Detective Koskowski looks to Derek to provide potential names.
Derek is a general contractor on the side. Some of the guys that Derek used in his contracting business actually lived in the Dorsey house at one time.
Derek Dorsey was basically going through an entire timeline of like kind of who was in and out of the house.
I have one guy that used to work with me, Elvin. Lance Kirkpatrick.
Lance Kirkpatrick had a drug problem. He had been friends with the Dorseys. He was just one of those people who you invite into your house for a weekend, and then 3 months later you'd be trying to get him out. And so he eventually got thrown out of their house.
But according to Derek, that weekend, Lance is on a shrimp boat out in the Atlantic. The second individual that Derek had talked about was a guy by the name of Joshua Veal. Derek had befriended Josh and gave him some work and trying to help him out. He's a young kid. Derek and Kim allowed Joshua to reside in their home, but they had a falling out, and eventually Joshua moved out.
But Derek says he was still hiring Josh for odd jobs and had been due to see him the morning he discovered Kim's body.
Sunday morning when he got off, Derek was going to pick up Joshua Veal. They had agreed to meet at a convenience store up on the north side of Jacksonville, basically to do some work for him.
Joshua Veal never showed up. Why wouldn't he show up for this meeting if he's going to get money and get paid?
He's familiar with the house. He's done some work in the past for the Dorseys. So Josh was number one at that point.
Police discover Veal has a criminal record, mostly for drug-related offenses.
And he had actually just been arrested earlier in that week leading up to the weekend Kim was murdered. So brought him down, put him in an interview room. I didn't tell him anything about a murder. I just introduced myself as a detective.
One of the techniques used is not to tell a loved one or someone close that the person you're asking about is in fact dead or been murdered. Then you drop the bombshell looking for the responses. Are they genuine? Are they fake?
Josh claims he'd been partying all weekend at his house, including the time detectives believe Kim was killed.
But you spent Friday night at the house?
Yeah.
Okay. You didn't go anywhere Friday night?
No.
Okay. All right. Saturday night, you get up?
we had drank Friday night, we had drank Saturday night.
He had been out Saturday night, and he just lazy, did not show up Sunday morning.
But when Larry mentions Kim's name, his attitude changes.
One of the things that struck me most about Joshua Veal's interview is that he kind of had a fascination or infatuation with Kim Dorsey, kind of like romantic interest. It was strange in that way.
My conversation with him was, when you lived with them, did you and Kim have anything going on, sexual? The way he answered it, it was a little kind of like he didn't, but if he coulda, he woulda.
How'd she look?
1 to 10. Would you ask me if I would hit it?
Sure.
8.
Joshua Veal's infatuation with Kim Dorsey has put him front and center in her murder investigation.
Have you ever had sex with her? Be honest with me.
No, I wish.
You wish?
So I started asking him, if he had talked to Kim recently, and he had. And then I finally said, well, did you hear what happened to her? He's like, no, what are you talking about?
She's dead.
Oh, don't tell me that, man.
just a flow of emotions. I mean, you would think that it was, in fact, his mom that was murdered, and he just couldn't deal with it.
You know anybody that might want to hurt her?
No. No, that was like a mom to me, man. Oh, please.
It was very authentic, and so it kind of X'd him off of my list. But still, you know, they went through and they got his DNA just to make sure that he was not, in fact, involved in the crime. It was negative. He was excluded as a contributor to the DNA.
Derek provides police with additional names of people familiar with his home.
Everybody we talked to, they all gave us the sample, and everyone kept coming back negative, negative, negative.
So Detective Kuskowski takes a new approach.
I want to do a walkthrough of the house with Derek and let him point out anything that maybe we missed, ask some questions about some things that we found before we turn the house back over to him. Because once we're done, we're done. When we initially walked the scene in the kitchen, we found 3 or 4 remotes in the sink. It's part of the surround sound system, which was very odd. Somebody had run water over the remotes. My partner asked him, hey, show us how to turn on the TV here in the living room. So Derek was able to turn the TV on, and right away, a pornographic movie starts to play. We're like, wow. And Derek loses it. He's like, that's not mine. Whoever did this, dropping expletives, whoever did this, they watched that. That is not my movie. My belief was that whoever committed the murder at some point sat down and watched this movie.
The discovery points to another man Derek says had recently been to the house.
They were having problems, I think, with the remote or something with their TV system.
Friday in the afternoon, they had a gentleman come over from a sound company that made some adjustments to the surround sound of his entertainment system.
The service call occurred approximately 12 hours before Kim was killed.
So the sound guy was in our crosshairs. He's the guy that knows how to run the system. He worked on the system and wire all these things in the sink. He's thinking in his mind, he puts it in the sink and runs water over it. Does it wash away any DNA or anything like that?
We didn't know if something happened between him and Kim where he maybe became infatuated with her or came back to the house.
Detectives quickly track him down.
So we met with the sound guy. He said, yeah, I went out on Friday night to work on the system. He said it wasn't unusual. He said, Derek's had me at this house before. He had another house that I used to go to and handle his affairs there with the sound system. We noticed when we were sitting there, the sound guy had some cuts on his hands. So, we keyed in on those. Were they the results of scratches that, were inflicted in a struggle with another person? We actually asked him about them, and he's like, well, I'm working with wire all the time, and I run it, up in attics, and so, my hands are always cut up.
The technician is adamant he never returned to the house.
We told him what had happened. He wasn't even aware of it, and this was 2 or 3 days after Kim's body was found, so he hadn't even seen anything on the news. Of course, I asked him, if he would volunteer a DNA sample, and he readily, hey, whatever you need. When I walked out of the interview with him, I said, I don't think so.
The DNA test confirms this instinct. The unsolved crime now begins to weigh heavily on the team.
Part of it was we had been up so long at this point, and we had taken samples from so many people. As an investigator and working with the evidence technicians, even if it takes you to a dead end, we need to go down that road, and we need to look at everything. We owe it to Kim, or any victim, that we, thoroughly investigate the entire case.
Then, they get the break they've been looking for.
There was a crime analyst that caught like a common, everyday type of police report on a temporary and unauthorized use of a vehicle.
It's kind of a fancy way of saying the car was stolen, but you let the person take it.
The theft took place just 17 hours before the murder.
So the girl that reported the car stolen made the police report. They took all of her information and, of course, the information of the person who she let use the car, who never returned the car, which was Lance Kirkpatrick.
Lance Kirkpatrick's name came up early on in the investigation when Derek Dorsey was basically going through and kind of who was in and out of the house. During the initial interview with Derek Dorsey, he calls him LJ, and I remember these words very clear. He was like, absolutely not. He would take a bullet for Kim.
Why are you so certain about him?
I just know him long enough. Something like that, no. I think we respected him too much.
Lance is still supposed to be on the shrimp boat. Nothing's adding up now.
That basically put Lance Kirkpatrick back on the map.
A stolen car report forces a familiar name back into focus: Lance Kirkpatrick.
I talked to the girl who reported the vehicle stolen. She laid out basically the activities of her on that Friday night. They were at his apartment on the south side with Lance and some other folks that were there. And Lance had agreed to go out to buy some drugs. And she lets him take the truck. We're talking early Saturday morning now.
And so that's when Lance Kirkpatrick leaves, never to return with that vehicle.
Detectives must determine if the car ever came close to the Dorsey home.
When the police respond to the scene, part of patrol's responsibility was a neighborhood canvass. So in the initial canvass, one of the patrol officers had talked to a neighbor of the Dorseys that said he had seen a blue small SUV out there that day.
This fits the description of the car Kirkpatrick stole.
Fast forward a few days, we got the information about this truck. One of the other mental notes was that there was a surveillance camera at the gate to the community. So, hey, let's go back and look at the video again. Or if it's working, we should have a video of the truck, which we did.
The footage places the SUV directly on the timeline at 6:30 a.m., the morning of the murder.
As soon as the police saw that surveillance video, Lance Kirkpatrick became the #1 suspect.
To locate him, they turned to the woman whose car he stole.
And I said, well, listen, I'm really looking for Lance. Well, she goes, well, I don't know where he is, but I know where a friend of his is named Brian Kiefer. I said, well, I'd like to talk to Brian. So took him into custody and talked to him about basically his activities and then about Lance Kirkpatrick.
Investigators learned that Brian was at the same house party when the SUV disappeared.
Brian Kiefer says he goes on a night-long taxi ride trying to figure out where Lance Kirkpatrick is because he's one of the ones that let Lance use the car. So he was basically guilty by association. He can't find him, only to find him the following day. He says that Lance looks disheveled. He notices that he has an injury on one of his hands.
What Brian then reveals is completely unexpected.
He tells me that he murdered somebody and is pretty much is going to prison, and there's nothing that can be done about it.
He just said it was a beating. He didn't describe it as we know it to be, which was absolutely horrific and violent.
There are a number of reasons why people, quote, confess to a crime. Primarily, we see it as a guilt complex. People can't wear it, they can't hide it, they can't keep it in. That's the #1 reason why people talk. #2 might be alcohol-fueled or drug-fueled, but then you're only getting a part of a story, as a rule. Usually, if a person's hell-bent to tell a friend of theirs, I did this dastardly deed, they're going to tell them some of the details of the murder itself, but not all of it.
I don't know whether he hit her with that pool stick but he kind of emphasized swinging the pool stick.
Okay.
And then he emphasized being shot at 5 times.
And he says, well, you know, Lance told me that he kept waiting for the 6th shot and it never came. But it was a 5-shot revolver.
But when he heard the window open, he thought the lady was going out through the window. So he ran in there and beat her with his hand and then stabbed her.
It is also through Brian Kiefer that we get Kim Dorsey's last words.
What does he say? Does he say that she was dead, or does he say anything about that?
He said the lady was saying, "Stop. You're killing me."
The detail Brian provides about his friend's actions is abnormally specific.
And it was information that only somebody that was there would have known. So Brian is, immersed himself in the middle of a homicide potentially based on all this information. He's saying Lance did it. Well, how do I know Brian didn't do it?
Brian Kiefer claims he knows who killed Kim Dorsey. But there's only one way to confirm if he's telling the truth. Find Lance Kirkpatrick.
Brian tells us last he saw Lance was at Brian's apartment on the south side of Jacksonville. So we had our law enforcement go over there and pay that apartment a visit. And they found Lance hiding in the attic.
The man once thought to be at sea finally sits down with Detective Koskowski.
All right. Look, Lance, have a seat over there, okay? This will make it a little bit easier.
He was calm, so I was trying to set the stage, just getting to know Lance a little bit more.
Again, careful not to mention Kim's murder.
You and Derek get along pretty well.
Oh, we get along great.
And he's trying to be nonchalant, oh, what are you talking about?
When's the last time you were over at Derek's house?
I went over there a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago.
Do you remember what day it was that you went over there and did that?
Yeah, it was Georgia, Florida.
Georgia, Florida. So
It was Georgia, Florida. It was right before the game.
So did you go inside then let yourself in?
No.
Florida, Georgia is sort of the secular holiday of Jacksonville. Everything shuts down for that weekend.
The game was on Saturday, the day of the murder. Lance has been around long enough with Derek, worked around Derek long enough, he knows the schedule too. Derek is gone for that 24-hour period. His wife was home by herself.
How about you and Kim?
We get along fine.
Okay, you ever had any problems with her?
Mm-mm.
No, nothing like that? Okay. All right.
No, pretty much get along with everybody.
Pretty long, okay. What if I told you I didn't believe all your story?
On what story?
Well,
on what part of the story don't you believe?
The next follow-up question he invoked, and he asked for an attorney, and at that point, we had to stop the interview.
I'm not saying anything else.
Okay. Good luck to you.
With Kirkpatrick refusing to cooperate, investigators must find another way to prove he was inside the house that day.
Lance was smart enough to know when to shut up that night. But at this point, when we weren't talking to Lance, we already had DNA foreign to Kim on her body.
The sheriff's office went about getting DNA from Lance Kirkpatrick's father.
The similarity is overwhelming.
In the quintillion, sextillion, it's like huge numbers, like 2 and 3 times the number of people on Earth. The fact that we had really significant DNA and the fact that he denied going in there was a critical lie that we were able to say, yeah, we got our man.
This not only confirms Kirkpatrick as the killer, but also clears the one remaining suspect, Brian Kiefer. For detectives, Kirkpatrick's movements in the hours before the murder suggest he had a sinister plan in mind.
Lance had, gone out that Friday night with somebody else's car to buy drugs and didn't come back with what he was supposed to come back with. He left to try to go make things right. The one thing he knows is the Dorseys. And he knows how to get into that community. He knows how to get into the house. Lance has been around long enough with Derek, worked around Derek long enough, he knows the schedule. Derek's gone for that 24-hour period. His wife was home by herself. Lance knows that. I think he sat across the street, waited for Derek to leave to go to work that morning. I think shortly thereafter, he went over to the house, initially looked under that dog for the key, let himself in with the key.
That's probably when Kim Dorsey heard him.
He basically lit into her physically, and it just went downhill from there.
The turmoil that she was going through, just a desperate picture of a woman trying to escape. I just couldn't imagine like the terror that she was experiencing.
Despite overwhelming evidence, Lance Kirkpatrick pleads not guilty.
Lance's version was that he and Kim Dorsey were lovers, and that he had gone to her house to have sex with her, and that after they had sex, Kim Dorsey started getting mad at him because he had helped set her husband up with other women, and that enraged Kim Dorsey, and she picked up a gun and started firing at him in a rage. And that everything that happened afterwards was him basically trying to fight back in self-defense.
Self-defense is I punch you and I try to get away from you. I don't beat you with a pool cue till I break the pool cue and half stab you in the neck and tie you up. That's not self-defense. That's a bunch of nonsense.
The jury finds him guilty of first-degree murder and rape. He's sentenced to life without parole. He remains eligible for appeal.
Life without parole is a long time to sit there. Ultimately, it's about Kim here. What happened to her in her house, that shouldn't happen to anybody.
I felt like I did Kim Dorsey justice. It's always a mixed feeling having to put all those facts and evidence out in front of their family, but now they know what happened to her and they knew that she was a fighter. I think that meant a lot to them, that she didn't go quietly. She fought with every cell in her body.
It was such an ugly deed. I want to believe that she never knew what happened.
A brutal killing.
There's never a motive to kill a 16-year-old high school cheerleader.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
Did she get kidnapped? Did somebody pick her up on the road?
It's almost as if he was trying to insert himself into the investigation.
He had a reputation of being on the criminal side of the law.
Those kids know things. Those kids talk.
The truth will be revealed.
We said, you made all those choices, and you need to pay the price.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. The border between Texas and Oklahoma is one of the least populated in America.
Montague County, Texas, and Jefferson County, Oklahoma, are only separated by the Red River. You've got farming communities on both sides, working class for the most part. You really wouldn't know if there wasn't a bridge and a river there that you were crossing a state line.
There was a rancher and his granddaughter who were crossing the bridge. And the rancher looked out into those murky waters. And he saw something floating. And he thought that there was a calf that had fallen dead in the river. Then his granddaughter said, "Grandpa, I believe that's a body."
When police arrive, they find the signs of a violent slaying scattered across the landscape.
The victim had sustained severe trauma, and all of it from the rear. The back, the buttocks, the shoulders, the head. It was consistent with a high-powered shotgun.
They were shot 9 times, which is not normal. That's overkill.
We were able to determine from the autopsy that the particular brand of shotgun shell was used, and it was Winchester.
And the forensic odontologist compared the dental records with the x-rays of the victim, and they matched up perfectly to the missing cheerleader from Waurika.
7 days earlier, Heather Rich had vanished from home 37 miles north in Waurika, Oklahoma.
Heather was a 16-year-old girl that wanted to be popular. She was pretty. Everybody knew her.
Heather was an intelligent girl. She had a good, caring, loving home. Came from a good family, good people. There's never a motive to kill a 16-year-old high school cheerleader.
A joint homicide task force, including Lydia Williams from the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, Lane Aiken of the Texas Rangers, and Chris Hamilton of the Montague County Sheriff's Office, must now determine how Heather's young life ended.
It's imperative to establish a timeline in a disappearance. You have to come to know the victim. You have to come to know the victim's families and their acquaintances.
Waurika is this small little town.
They took a lot of pride in their football team. They took a lot of pride in their kids.
Everybody knew everybody else. Everybody knew everybody else's business. It's just a little bitty community that was very close-knit.
It was like any other small town. They were not used to experiencing such a horrific murder. Her parents were shattered by the events that had occurred, and they were exceedingly cooperative with the investigation. Heather Rich was last seen at home on the night of October 2nd. It was a Wednesday night. And based on the evidence that we gained from the medical examiner's office, we believe that Heather had been in the water for about a week.
This suggests Heather was killed within hours of when she was last seen that previous Wednesday.
The night she disappeared, her mom came in and had a $300 phone bill, and she was not a happy camper. The last word she said to her was, "All you do is cost me money." And she's always regretted that.
An hour later, she had already washed her hair. They said it was unusual for her to wash her hair before she went to bed. She normally did that just before she went to school in the mornings.
Heather got ready, supposedly ready for bed. Then we believe she snuck out the window.
The next morning, Heather's parents go to wake her for school.
They went into her room. Her bed was made, and Heather was not in the bed.
Parents' initial reaction was panic.
They even said she'd done it before. She'd sneak out, but then she'd come back. But that didn't happen.
Another family member then recalls an incident that had taken place the previous evening.
She'd taken a phone call, and one of her brothers had, as little brothers will do, I think he was kind of snooping in.
He heard his sister say, "Oh, isn't that sweet?" Little brother asked Heather, "Who are you talking to?" And she said she was talking to Carly, another cheerleader. We were able to go back and look at the call logs, and it showed that that call had come from a payphone. And that was about 10 p.m. that night.
Most people are harmed by people they know.
So our first thought was that whoever made this phone call was likely involved in the murder.
They focus their attention on the woman Heather claimed to have been talking to.
Carly and Heather were best of friends. They were on the cheerleading squad together. And according to Carly's mother, Carly had been grounded, so she did not have the opportunity on the night of October 2nd to have made a phone call from a payphone.
When they ask Carly who she thinks Heather was speaking to, she gives them two names.
Carly knew that Heather's past boyfriend was Randy Wood. And Carly also knew that Heather's current boyfriend was Josh Bagwell. Randy and Josh were friends, and they both had fond feelings for Heather. Carly told us that in Randy's mind, the relationship between Heather and Randy had been extremely serious. But that was not the case with Heather. Heather had actually broken off the relationship and then had taken up with Josh Bagwell. That type of situation is wrought with difficulties.
Either one of those two would have been easy choices for who she was talking to that night.
Being in love is a dangerous thing. You can't necessarily anticipate how you're going to react if you're spurned or if someone else steps into the love triangle.
All I knew is she had talked to somebody. She sneaks out the window, and you can't really assume anything after that.
Detectives focusing on the murder of cheerleader Heather Rich have their first two suspects, her new boyfriend Josh Bagwell and her ex-boyfriend Randy Wood.
Randy Wood was an impressive-looking young man. Dark-haired, physically fit, looked like a typical high school football player. Randy was highly regarded in the community. He had even been elected homecoming king, so he was very popular on campus.
He lived with his grandma, who supported him. Randy didn't have a lot, as opposed to some of the others.
As football practice was closing, I sat down in the locker room with Randy. He recited what he recalled of his activity during the night when Heather came up missing. He said he was with Josh Bagwell. There was a trader, a travel trader. We learned that 3 guys were at that party: Randy Wood, Josh Bagwell, and Curtis Gamble. And they had been playing dominoes and drinking.
And then like 10:30 at night, Curtis and Josh and Randy had gone into a little town named Comanche, bought some food, and then came back, and they had just crashed at the camper. But they had not seen Heather. So the next thing we wanted to do was to talk to Josh and Curtis to see what their stories were.
They head to the home of Josh Bagwell, Heather's current boyfriend.
Josh lived with his grandparents. They were highly regarded, had been anchors of the community.
Investigators speak to Josh's grandmother, who owns the trailer.
She basically was telling us they had set up camp out in the travel trailer, playing dominoes. Perhaps they were drinking a little much, but they were not involved in any nefarious conduct, according to her.
What did Josh say? They're all drinking a little, we get some food. Very same story.
Their final stop is the 3rd man at the trailer, Curtis Gamble.
Curtis Gamble was known around town as the rebel, the one who people liked to be around, but at the same time people feared.
He'd been through juvenile system before. Curtis tells us, I'm over at Josh's, haven't seen Heather. There wasn't really anything suspicious.
They pretty much corroborated what they were doing that night, and it didn't concern the death of Heather.
So now we're thinking, is there somebody else out there that we need to go talk to? Because somebody in this town knows something.
Investigators return to Heather's high school for new leads.
The professional staff at the school was very cooperative, from the principal superintendents all the way down.
The high school athletic director said that he had seen Heather in a pickup going down the street with former high school students.
But it was in the early morning hours after the disappearance, which obviously is big time as far as the timeline goes. He said he met a vehicle belonging to Jody Freeman and then a passenger, Eric Thompson, and claimed that in the vehicle with Jody and Eric was Heather Rich.
Detectives need to question the young men about the sighting. They start with the owner of the truck, Jody Freeman.
Jody admitted they was out riding around, messing around.
But Freeman denied the fact that Heather had been sitting beside him.
Jody claimed he really had no relationship at all with Heather, or just knew who she was. So we go to Eric Thompson, He said he knew Heather, but he also claimed that Heather hadn't been in that vehicle, that he had not seen Heather that morning.
With both men's stories matching up, the team must find another way to determine if they are on Heather's timeline. They speak to Eric's girlfriend.
She claimed he was home the actual night of Heather disappearing.
This means he could not have been the person who called her from the payphone the night she left the house.
She was able to place him at home at the appropriate times. You get a good feel of how comfortable people are on what they're telling you, how they're able to recount the events of that day. Their stories were consistent with one another's, and the other facts and circumstances that we could confirm completely led away from them. So we were able to eliminate them as suspects. The athletic director was able to identify, of course, the vehicle and the person that was driving it, and he was correct in identifying the other male passenger. He just misidentified Heather. These people are doing their best to find Heather, just like you are, so that's where you get the false sightings.
As investigators continue to canvass the town, a new name starts to come up with increased frequency.
I learned from my conversations that there was a man by the name of Craig.
Craig had a reputation of being a rough and tumble person that was on the criminal side of the law. Craig was older, full-time employment, wasn't a high school student.
We knew he was furnishing marijuana and/or methamphetamine to some of the school kids. And he had allegedly furnished marijuana or methamphetamine to Heather Ridge.
It was thought that there was some sort of narcotics transaction that he may have been involved with that Heather'd find out about.
Heather might have known something about that, and that's why she was killed.
So Craig is someone that's getting the finger pointed at him, and someone that we need to focus on.
Detectives searching for the killer of Heather Ridge have identified a local drug dealer as a suspect in her murder.
Methamphetamine's a big problem. Where there's drugs involved, there's a very real possibility of a fatal consequence.
They bring Craig in for questioning.
Yes, he knew Heather. He knew her casually. They weren't in any sort of relationship together, didn't hang out together.
He did admit that he had provided her with alcohol, but he denied any knowledge, any involvement in any form or fashion with her death. Craig said that he hadn't seen Heather since a football game on September 20th, 2 weeks prior to her disappearance.
We focused on his timeline, where he was the night that Heather disappeared, what was his work schedule, who could alibi him. He is more than willing to provide his alibi corroboration.
Craig claims he was at home with his mother the night Heather disappeared and went straight to work the following day.
His accounts of his whereabouts and his activities leading up to the disappearance of Heather was corroborated through witnesses and through his work history.
There were some folks who believed Craig could have been involved because of his alleged drug dealing ways. But to me and to the other investigators, This was not a guy who would commit a murder.
Pursuing the drug angle further, investigators focus on Heather's peers.
The youth, the high school students, was a bit of a closed society. They were hesitant to talk to the police. There was an obvious mistrust of law enforcement.
Could be a number of reasons why that was. Number one, there was a little subculture in Warwick, Oklahoma, of narcotics.
One of the big reasons in small towns why kids get involved in drugs is absolutely, without question, boredom and lack of opportunity. People will wax nostalgic about small town America, but part of the danger is getting wrapped up in the drugs, the alcohol, and that closed-minded behavior.
These kids were going, we don't care who you are, we're not talking to you. It was the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen. You know those kids talk, they're on the phone. Heather was on the phone constantly. You know those kids know something, but they're not talking.
Hoping to break the silence, detectives take a different approach.
The main reason why we had the tip line was just to get the information to the investigative teams as quickly as possible. And it wasn't as if we had hundreds of tips, but we'd have 20 or 30 tips every day.
One of the leads quickly catches their attention.
A Marina employee who was working at a sizable marina on Lake Murray in Oklahoma called us and reported that he had seen Heather on I-35, that they were traveling the same direction, and he saw her in a vehicle as they passed each other.
This was on October 2nd, within 12 hours of Heather's disappearance.
We drove to Lake Murray and met with this young man.
The Marina employee, Tyler Datton, immediately sets investigators on edge.
And in our conversation with this man, he became obviously nervous and was providing information which to us as investigators seemed to be a bit deceptive. The way he started reacting to my questioning and how nervous he got, you know, my internal lie detection meter started skyrocketing. It's almost as if he was trying to insert himself into the investigation.
When a person is overly helpful, you have to take a step back and ask yourself, why? What are they hiding? Why are they giving me all this? Often that's a defensive mechanism. That's just to throw them off the scent mechanism as well.
The local Marina employee said he had met Heather when Heather's family had opened up a business for the summer at the Marina. There was some sort of acquaintanceship there. What that acquaintanceship is, I believe, was very casual from Heather's side and probably a little more of a fixation from the employee's side. Maybe he had envisioned some sort of relationship with the victim that was just a vision and not a reality, and had acted upon that fantasy.
We offered him the opportunity to take a polygraph. And basically the questions would be, do you know what happened to Heather Rich? Are you involved in the disappearance or death of Heather Rich? And he failed the polygraph. So we continued to think that there was some possibility he had knowledge that he didn't want to share it.
It didn't add up. And you start questioning as to the motives. This person had a connection to Heather that was not normal.
After failing his polygraph, detectives are sure that Marina employee Tyler Datton is lying about his sighting of 16-year-old Heather Rich on the day she disappeared.
We asked for consent to search his pickup. We went through the pickup looking for fibers, anything at all that might give us evidence or indication there was evidence that Heather Rich had ever been in that pickup, or that any fibers from that pickup might have been on Heather's body. But we found no evidence there that would connect the Lake Murray witness to Heather.
When asked where he was the night she died, Tyler says he spent it at his father's house.
We were able to verify that that was accurate. He did not have the opportunity on the night of October 2nd to have made a phone call from a payphone. So we were able to say fairly definitively that this guy did not kill Heather Rich. This is one of those things that happens so often in a high-profile investigation because you have people who want to be involved just so they can experience the excitement. And it's for us as investigators to be able to tell the difference. We were frustrated because we had gone through so many leads and we still didn't have anybody in jail. And there's this thought within law enforcement, if you don't have the bad guys captured within 48 hours, then the investigation may be going nowhere, that it may be classified as a cold case. My wife and I, we had a daughter at that time who was about the same age, bore some resemblance to Heather, and that daughter was a high school cheerleader as well. I could not help but think about my own children and the problems and the feelings that those parents may have had. And so, as investigators, we have got to provide those answers.
"19 days after Heather's disappearance, investigators get a break.
The owner of the local hardware store called and said, just prior to Heather's disappearance, 2 young men had come in, and that those 2 young men had purchased 4 boxes of shotgun shells.
They had actually purchased Winchester double-aught buck, the same brand and type of shotgun shell that was used to cause Heather's death.
And they provided us with a receipt showing those 20 rounds of shotgun shells were purchased by Josh Bagwell. The owner said that there were 2 young men came in. We showed the photo array to the owner. She reviewed those and she immediately identified the second person as being Curtis Gamble.
So now we've got some pretty substantial leads that is pointing in a direction that we were initially pointed from the very beginning, which was this party that may have occurred at Josh's travel trailer.
The party took place during the window of time Heather is believed to have left her house.
We had 3 guys. Curtis Gamble, Josh Bagwell, Randy Wood were at that party, only a few blocks away from Heather Rich's house.
And we'd come to find out that Curtis did have a shotgun. And that apparently was pretty proud of it.
So we started looking at Curtis Gamble. We'd spoken with Curtis's grandmother, where Curtis was living at the time. She was concerned about a statement that Curtis had made to her. Curtis told his grandmother that he knew of someone who had been murdered.
The grandmother then reveals another damning fact.
Heather's body was found off the Belknap Creek Bridge. The grandmother knew that spot. She had been there before. She had taken Curtis there fishing as a child. So we're beginning to connect the dots in that he has a shotgun. He bought the shotgun shells. He knows where the murder scene is.
At this point, the investigation is closing in a particular area, and it's closing in very quickly.
So we decided to call Curtis in on the pretense of talking to him about the shotgun he bought.
I introduced myself to Curtis, and I started our interview. He denied any knowledge of Heather Rich's death. I asked him what kind of shotgun he had. It was one of the shotguns that we knew that could shoot 9 rounds without being reloaded.
They press him about the shells he purchased with Josh Bagwell.
Curtis had claimed that the shotgun shells that they had purchased, that he was just using that for sporting reasons, shooting frogs, target practice. He said he could take us to those shotgun shells. He knew exactly where they were. We drive back down to the north side of the Red River at his direction, and he takes us to various locations where he thinks that those shotgun shells might have been ejected after he had used it for target practice. We found all kinds of shotgun shells, but we found no Winchester buckshot, none whatsoever. At that point, I believe he realized that we had so much evidence that he could probably never get out of it. We get back in the car, and I turn to Curtis and ask him, "Are you aware of what happened to Heather Rich?" Finally, he admitted that he knew what happened.
Detectives believe they have finally broken through to their lead suspect in the murder of Heather Rich, Curtis Gamble.
Curtis told a story that he hadn't told before.
Curtis says Heather did party with them that night at the trailer and claims her former boyfriend, Randy Wood, sexually assaulted her.
Curtis said that Randy was concerned because he thought that Heather was going to charge him with rape. So according to Curtis, it was Randy's idea to shoot and kill her.
And after the statement had been taken from Curtis, we arrested Randy Wood, along with Josh Bagwell.
Josh lawyered up Didn't want to talk.
When detectives turn to Randy, he offers up a very different story.
Randy said it was Curtis who fired the 9 fatal shots, and that he basically sat in the pickup with his hands over his face, knowing what was about to happen.
When you have multiple suspects, you have to find a way to corroborate who might have had the firearm on the fateful evening. You're looking for evidence that one or the other is in fact the killer.
Determined to get to the truth, the team scours the records of both men and uncovers something damning in Curtis's juvenile report.
Curtis had said prior to this event that he had fantasized about raping and killing a girl.
It had been Curtis's dream all along to commit a murder such as this.
After what we know about him and the physical evidence that we've already gathered, we believed Curtis was the person responsible.
Using the reconstructed timeline, the team believes they have enough to prove that Curtis Gamble was the ringleader in the brutal slaying of 16-year-old Heather Rich.
Randy and Curtis and Josh were all over at Josh's camper.
They were playing dominoes. They were just having a good time. 2 hours later, the 3 of them get in the pickup, drive to a nearby town to get something to eat or to buy more whiskey. About an hour or so later, Heather received a phone call from Josh Bagwell, her boyfriend, from a payphone. She snuck out of the house. She walked a few blocks to the party that was being had at the trailer. Later on, she was alone in that trailer with Josh, while Randy and Curtis drove around up and down Main Street. And then when they came back about 2 hours later, she was intoxicated to the point that she had passed out. And in that intoxicated state, I believe that both Randy and Curtis either did or attempted to have forced sexual relations with her. She remained passed out. They dressed her, put her in the back seat of that pickup. Curtis drove around the north side of the Red River to the Belknap Creek Bridge. And then he takes his shotgun and loads it up all the way. And then he unloads that shotgun on Heather Rich. I want to believe that she never knew what happened when she was shot that 9 times and her body dumped into the creek.
I firmly believe it was Curtis Gamble, but the other 2 willingly participated into taking her from that travel trailer, putting her in the back of that pickup, and driving her to Texas, where they put her out on the bridge. And they all knew what Curtis was going to do and allowed it to occur.
On October 25th, 1996, Curtis Gamble, Randy Wood, and Josh Bagwell are all charged with Heather's murder.
Josh Bagwell never confessed. He denied to the very, very end. He never felt badly about participating in the murder. He provided the shotgun shells, he provided the alcohol, he provided the pickup, he provided the means to commit the murder. Curtis Gamble is the absolute epitome of evil. Gamble was the murderer. Josh Bagwell was his assistant. If there's anyone in the group who has any mitigating qualities, it would be Randy Wood. He lamented the fact that he was involved. Randy Wood was just there and didn't have the courage to stop it.
After lengthy trials, all three are found guilty and sentenced to life.
For you to take this girl's life and affect their parents, affect their family, affect their community, affect your own future, affect your own life, that's beyond me. I don't understand. What I have peace over is these three won't be killing again.
Our job is to seek justice in every avenue. But there really is no justice in the death of a child.
I don't know how you close a wound that's been so devastatingly opened. But her mother and father at least have some understanding of what happened to their child. And then those who caused those deadly wounds are paying the price.